noches. Bienvenidos a Centro. Welcome everybody to Centro. I am so happy to be here tonight to introduce this event. I am Cristel Lucino Diaz. I'm Centro's Director of Research Programs and Public Humanities. And again, I'm thrilled to welcome you to tonight's event, Cafecito con Esmeralda, Santiago y las Comadres. So this is like, we were just talking, it's like, welcome to our living room. We're going to feel like estamos en la sala de la casa, and we're going to have a really wonderful conversation with these writers. Before we get started, I want to talk to you a little bit about an initiative that we have, that we're doing right now at Centro. As many of you know, yesterday was Giving Tuesday, and Centro has launched a campaign to raise money for the 6th season of Puerto Rican Voices, our New York Emmy Award-winning investigative TV documentary series, which explore the intersections of resilience, resistance, providing a map to the ongoing challenges faced by Puerto Ricans living in both the archipelago and the diaspora. Puerto Rican Voices employs nearly 100 Puerto Rican producers, directors, cinematographers, editors, musicians, and more, while reaching over 100,000 viewers. In order to make our 6th season possible, we need to raise $250,000. Any donation of any amount helps us reach our goal. You can make a donation by going to our website, centropr.hunter.cuny.edu, or scrolling to the bottom of the page and clicking the donate button, or by scanning the QR code, which is at our check-in table and our reception table. So just keep that in mind. It's a really wonderful series that has already had so much impact on our community. But moving on to the reason why we're all here tonight, is this wonderful celebration of Puerto Rican literature, of these fierce Puerto Rican writers that I'm really honored to introduce to you tonight. We have Esmeralda Santiago, who is the best-selling author of 3 memoirs, When I Was Puerto Rican, Almost a Woman, The Turkish Lover, in addition to 3 novels, America's Dream, Conquistadora, and Las Madres. We also have Sandra Guzmán, who is a pioneering Afro-Indigenous storyteller, culture writer, literary editor, and documentary filmmaker, whose work reclaims and recenters narratives of people and community outside the margins. She is the editor of the International Anthology of Latin American Women Writers, Daughters of Latin America, an international anthology of writing by Latina women.
Yeah.
And finally, we have Elisabet Velasquez, who is a Boricua writer from Brooklyn, now living in Jersey City. She is known for her poems, which have been featured on NBC, Telemundo, Latino Magazine, Refinery 29, and more. She is a Poets House Fellow, Dodge Poetry Fellow in New Jersey, Council for the Arts Fellow, and her debut young adult novel in verse, When We Make It, received the Kirkus Best Young Adult Fiction Award, the YALSA Best Fiction for Young Adults Award. Wow. Welcome. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us, and I hope you enjoy this wonderful event with us.
Thank you so much. I wanted to tell you why we're here. It's because we go to one another's events. We do events together, and always at the end we end up just talking about anything and everything, and it occurred to us that it would be fun to do it in public. I don't know why. But so it is really the end of a journey and the beginning of another for all of us. We all have books that are now available, and I hope that you saw the table. If you don't own our books, get them, please. Support our work. But I also think it's just so important for our readers and our followers and our fans and our friends to know us in a less formal way than, on a stage with high heels and the whole business. So our idea was to just really have a conversation between us, but also you can participate. We would love for this to be a dialogue. If you have a question at any point, you don't have to wait for the Q&A. I know it's going to drive the photographer crazy, but there's a roaming mic, so that everyone can hear your question, also for the people who are seeing us from via Zoom. As you can see, we're 3 different generations of writers. I'm la más vieja.
La matriarca, la bichota.
Y ella es la más joven. Y esta está in between us. Es como 3 hermanas, tú sabes. And we all love one another's work. I have known Sandra for a very, very long time. Actually, I didn't see her for a long time, and the last time I had seen you, you were 9 months pregnant, wearing leather pants and really high heels.
On brand.
Yeah.
On brand.
Yeah, see, yeah, we're like,
Linda.
how does she
Always.
do that? Pero, so then we reconnected a few years ago, and so here we are back together. And Elisabet, I read her book, and I stunned, and I just reached out to her and said, I love your book.
And I was like, I love you. Do you know me?
So this is how we know one another. We have not, she's the youngest of my friends, and she's like somewhere in the middle. We just wanted to really be together with our readers. I write novels and memoirs. Sandra is an anthologist and a journalist and a storyteller. And we have a fantastic poet here who also writes novels. So we just wanted to tell you about ourselves and the work that we do, and for you to ask any questions that you might have for us about anything, even our process or how many children we have, stuff like that. So, vamos pa'lante. ¿Cómo estás, mami?
Yo estaba nerviosa. I didn't think I was going to make it on time. Traffic in New York is reaching California heights. I am so happy and so excited to be in conversation with you, Esmeralda, and you, Elisabet. I am a fan. I'm a friend, but I'm a fan. You have inspired me so much, and I was thinking about today, and I was thinking about the meaning of today, and I was thinking about the time this friend of mine called me a Puerto Rican supremacist because I just told her that we are grand people.
Yes.
We are. And in the music, in the arts, in the sciences, in the food arts. And I remember the first time I encountered Esmeralda Santiago's work and how seen I felt and how grand I felt. And to be in conversation with you at the end of this promotional journey of your latest novel, and to kind of close out, your publicity with this conversation in una sala con Boricuas feels really
That's right, that's right. This is a very special, y'all are like in a very special space because this is the last leg of this tour. So for Esmeralda, so we are.
Y aquí estamos en el barrio. Sponsored by Hunter College. It's fantastic. It's really fantastic. ¿Y tú cómo estás? ¿Cómo estás?
Ay, estamos iguales. I was late, But I was like, it can't be that bad because we're Puerto Rican, so that it coincides. I was like, my people will understand, they will get it. Some might be mad, but we'll figure it out afterwards. But I'm good. Se me rompió la falda on the way here. I was telling them, but I'm a mom, so I kind of knew that was gonna happen. So I had an extra skirt in the, because I'm extra. I had an extra skirt in the bag, so we figured you wouldn't even know. But I had to tell you because these things happen. And so I'm really grateful to be here. I wanna mention that I am only here because my sisters sought me out. These are my older sisters, these are my friends, these are my mentors, and these have been women who have extended their wisdom to me in the way that I want to continue to do for folks that are coming up, whether you be a writer, whether you be an artist, whether you a mommy, you don't know what's going on, these are my examples. And I'm just really honored to be in conversation with y'all, to have your phone numbers, to be like, mira, I'm a little stressed out about this. ¿Qué hago? And it's really important to have that with each other, especially in the writing community, because it can feel, I know when I first started writing, and y'all can chime in, it felt so far away for me, from where I came from the kind of life that I lived. I was like, nobody's gonna wanna hear that. Nobody, but we were talking about it, right? The same way, like we talked about our lives in our neighborhoods with our people. My mother was like the biggest storyteller I knew. And she would talk to strangers. Like in the doctor's office, when she picked me up from school, she'd always find somebody to talk, me, and would tell the whole day, this is what happened to me, And so, storytelling is very innate for us. And then we entered the publishing space, and it becomes this very new thing that we have to learn, even though we've been storytellers from the jump.
Yeah, because I think one of the things about once you become a published writer, we're still the same people, but to our publishers, we're a product. And I think our readers really don't know that unless they hear it from us, because the publishers are not going to tell you. But it's really, sometimes it feels that, we need this kind of community and this kind of friendships, because I think the image is that writers are really competitive with each other. I have not experienced that at all, except for one person who I will not mention. I just tell you, it was a guy, a gringo, and so so I just.
Is it in the next memoir?
Yeah. He's not worth any more sentences for me. But I think for us, it was really important for us, for you to know that we are supportive of each other, and those of you who are hoping to be writers, or who are hidden writers, or who are writing but you're not sure if you're writers, we are there. There's a bunch of us who are really willing, and we want to be a part of your journey by telling you the kinds of things you should avoid, the kinds of parties you shouldn't go to. And don't talk to this guy if you call me.
I want to share a story about how this anthology that I edited came about, and when Esmeralda talks about sisterhood, she is the example of sisterhood. She guided me throughout the whole 2-year process. She opened doors for me, and there are writers in there that she's known for years, and I wanted to be in touch with them. She was like, oh yeah, let me hear. This is the email, this is the phone number. And then when we couldn't find them, she opened so many doors, and I saw sisterhood in practice in a way that enlivened me and inspired me. So esto no es de boca para afuera, esto es viviente. Acciones.
I don't want this to be like a eulogy. It's not about me. Estoy aquí todavía, tú sabes. I really appreciate it, pero yo me ababacho mucho. We're not supposed to speak in Spanish. I'm sorry, we're translators here somewhere. I think didn't we get an email that we shouldn't speak Spanish because there's translators? I got one. Anyway, bueno, entonces sigo por ahí. Anyway, so no, yo me ababacho porque, I'm the eldest of 11 children, and so my experience is that you share. See, we have little tiffs with each other, como decía mi mamá, discusiones. Ellos no se peleaban, ellos no pelean, ¿verdad? Discusiones. So we have discusiones, but I think the whole idea there's so few of us. so few of us who are out there doing this work.
And so many. Like, there's so few of us and so many.
So many que no se atreven.
Que no se atreven, or that don't have the access. You know, it's amazing how many conversations I have on a daily basis of people that I'm like, ¿y dónde está tu libro? Like, where? Because we have stories. They're out there. And I think for me, like, I came in very late to the canon of Puerto Rican writers. I grew up in a very insular, like, Pentecostal community in Brooklyn, in Bushwick, and so my mother, the only thing I read was the Bible, you know? And it was like, I know there's a Puerto Rican in the Bible somewhere. There's gotta be.
Samsung.
But I did. I inserted myself into those texts that were, you know, and how I actually came into writing was through my sister's diary. And she would write it. I did. Mira, I only had the Bible. I was like, I need, you know, right. My mother started taking me to the library after, but I was just like, oh my God, something's gotta give. And my sister would watch her. She was like, ya está escribiendo, because she was never like scholarly. So I was like, I know this is not an assignment. And I knew she would hide it under the bed. So, you know, whenever she went out to hacer la de ella, I was like, oh my God. And that was the first time that I saw our stories in a book, was in her journal.
Wow.
And so I credit her as being the first writer that inspired me to write, because I didn't even know that we could do that. You know, that we had the agency and the power and the authority to take a pen and say, I'm crushing on the boy from the bodega up the block, you know, and that was something that was worthy of writing down, because it seems so mundane.
Yeah.
But it still happens every day. We have so many stories about things that we think don't matter to anybody. And I just want to see more of us out here.
And this is it. When you said it earlier, also that, you know, when we people like us, we don't think anybody else cares about people like us. And so even if we want to write, I mean, I put it off for so many years because I thought, who cares about a Puerto Rican girl who comes to Brooklyn at 13 who doesn't speak, you know? I mean, I had all these reasons why my story would not mean anything to anybody else but me.
When did you say fuck it? When did you say?
When I think it was when my first child was born, and I lived in a suburb of Boston, south of Boston, and I would walk around this little village, and we moved there because the only place we could afford to buy a house. So we never even thought about, oh, we're going to live in a place where it's going to be people like us. No, we can afford it, right? So, everywhere I went, people asked me, where are you from? And so I realized, okay, they're not asking where I'm from. They're telling me, what are you doing here? And so I realized that I better start writing some of these stories so that my children who are going to grow up in this town would know what her mother was doing there, basically, and so that's when it started. It was from all these questions, you know. But I remember taking a course and with a wonderful poet who I just said to him, you know, I'm just writing these essays just for my children, you know, because nobody cares about Puerto Ricans' lives, you know, and he said, but you care. And man, I drove home that day and I wrote How to Eat a Guava. I mean, it was like that. That's what I needed. I needed somebody to say, it's not about them, it's about you wanting to tell a story. That's right. So it was amazing.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I grew up around storytellers. I was telling them that I'm going to be going to Puerto Rico tomorrow night to promote Hijas de América Latina. The book has been translated to the Spanish, and it's going to launch in Peñuelas. Any Peñuelas people here? O Ponce? No? Yay! Hello! And so it is in these small pueblos where I heard the most beautiful poetry in the world. It is in these small pueblos where I first heard the most beautiful storytelling. We come from an incredible oral literature tradition. And so what we're doing is putting it on paper. That's all. And so that's the beauty of what we do. The sound, the rhythm, the music, that is what we're transferring on paper. And our stories have survived through generations and generations because our people know how to tell them and urged and knew it was very important to tell these stories. And I'm sure everybody here has millions of stories, and I'm not exaggerating, of traditions that have survived, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And that's where I really learned how to write, how to think, how to compose, and the elegance of how to tell a story.
Now, Sandra, you are amazing in a lot of ways, but one of the things that I love about you is that you are a storyteller and you use different mediums to tell stories.
Yeah.
How did you come to know that how did you come to access all of the different ways to tell stories that you do?
I love that story. Well, the first one is I used to write diaries when I was a little girl. They were pink and they had little keys. And my brother read my diary.
I'm sorry. I feel guilty now.
And he found out that I had a crush on Philip, who was in science class. But so how did I come to all these different platforms? Life, sometimes I was fired from one job and I had to find another, right? So when I was let go from one job, the media is also constantly changing. It's in constant revolution. So I started out as a newspaper. My professional writing career started as a newspaper journalist. And I want to shout out my best friend, Rosana Rosado, who hired me at El Diario La Prensa. Legendary, she's a legend, an icon, and she hired me as a reporter right out of college to write in Spanish, even though my Spanish sucked, because she thought that I knew how to get to a story and come back and tell it. And she wanted me to tell it in whatever language I was comfortable in, and it happened to be in Spanglish. And then after that, I just kind of journeyed through television, and then from the TV job, I was recruited to be editor of Latina. And then I was, I wanted to be more intimately in touch with the readers of Latina, and I wrote this book called The Latina's Bible. And Latina's Bible, you remember that?
Of course.
Because you gave me, can we talk about the snobbery of literary people?
Yes, let's do that.
Can we, no names, but when I finished that book.
We've reached the bochinche session.
Bochinche time.
That was the last time you saw me, right? Because then I had the baby, I became a hermit, then I was whatever. But yes, I love leather pants, and these are pleather, because now I'm a vegetarian. So I write this book. It's a nonfiction book. It's a more intimate conversation with Latinas across the nation about being a woman, and being a woman that is in two different worlds, the gringo world, the professional world, and then our world. And in the book world, you want to get quotes from different writers to tell the world, this book is amazing. And so what you try to do is you get your friends and people in the business to read your work and then to give you a quote. Well, I went to some of my favorite writers, Esmeralda among them, and some of these, I'm not going to name names because I'm not going to name them, but I will say that I was told we don't really promote those kinds of books because it was a nonfiction book. And the only one who said yes and who gave me a quote was Esmeralda Santiago. This is like more than 20 years ago. It's a long time ago. So anyway, after Latina, I kind of it was just life kind of pushing me in different directions. And what I've learned in this journey is that I am desperate to tell our stories, and whatever way and whatever manner and whatever platform I will tell the story. And that's how it's been for my journey.
Yeah, you touched on something that I think is really important and has been important for me and how I move through the world, but also in terms of like anybody here who is a writer or is like starting that journey or thinking about it. I think what's really wonderful about our people and just how we operate and how we move is that sometimes, like you were shouting out your homegirl, right? Sometimes our friends or our homies will believe in us before we believe in us, right? Or like we'll see things in us that we haven't seen yet, right? And when I first started writing, it was like major like imposter syndrome. You know, I still like have my moments, right? I'm a little bit better now, but it can be really difficult to see yourself if you're constantly like comparing yourself to like, you know, folks that maybe you admire or lo que sea. But sometimes you have those people that are like, I see you. I see. Do you not see yourself? And that hold the mirror up to you. Those are your people, man. Hold them. I got my girl right there, Angie. Right?
Angie. Hi, Angie. Angie's a writer too.
Yeah, Angie's a writer too. And so it's important to have those folks in your corner that hold mirrors up to you and that you can hold mirrors también. Because sometimes, you know, the other thing is that you have to say yes to yourself first before. A lot of times I used to be like, I'm not gonna apply to this thing because they're gonna say no to me. So I wasn't allowing someone to say yes to me, I was saying no to myself first. And I think that's really important in this journey también, is to, mira, la vida es una. Like, what are you gonna do? Say no? Okay, next. You know, we keep it moving. And I think that spirit of resilience también is something that keeps us, you know, going. I think we as a people have been through so much that it's just like, okay, well, you're not telling me nothing new. I'm gonna, you know, you reject me in this sense, you know, once I have learned to accept myself, there's nothing that you can reject. Because I'm going to keep going. And so I honor that spirit in you both, because you both have held up mirrors to me and have seen things that, you know, Sandra, I had a poem called Elephant about street harassment, and Sandra was like, immediately was like, we're going to cover it. We're going to go to NBC, you were at NBC at the time, NBC Latino at the time, and it was just like, no questions asked, like, I was just like, and I'm telling my friends, like, I think we're gonna be on NBC Latino, like, I think, you know, and you held that mirror up to me, you know, and you continue to do that. So, you know, have those folks around you that are supporting you and that are uplifting you and that are breathing life into you when you don't necessarily when you kind of feel lifeless, because life can kick our ass.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, I think we can extend that to any kind of artistic endeavor, because I think artistas tienen que hacer arte, you know. We just have to do it. And the thing about if you have this desire to be a writer, it doesn't matter if you get published. It really doesn't matter. It matters that you write it, because your stories are your stories, and nobody's going to have the same stories. They don't see the world through the same eyes, and so it's important to write them, even if you don't think of yourself as a writer con comillas, you know. And it's the same thing for any kind of artist who feels that pressure, because it really is a pressure, ¿verdad? It's not like, if there are days when you don't write, you're
oh my God,
irrita, ¿verdad?
Stress.
Yeah,
quieta.
yeah,
like I got kids. Mira, ¿qué tú haces? Yo estoy escribiendo. Tú no tienes homework. You know, it's like you
find something to do.
Something to do.
Do you have any friends you want to go out? Yeah, that kind of. Pero, you know, it's really important for us, especially as moms and dads, if we have children who have this artistic desire, it's really, really important to nurture it, because artists who are not nurtured are people who really mess up in a lot of different ways that you would never even recognize that it came from that frustration of being able to express themselves in whatever form it is. And, I think it's really, I think especially with writing, tu hermana and secret diaries, right, that everybody had to find. I wrote journals also, pero we threw them away every time we moved. I wish I had them now, because it would be, and it would be things about, oh, I saw this boy, or I got that girl, or I wish, your wishes, or your, all the things that you would like to do. It's really, yes. I hate my mother. My mother hates me. I have one of my sisters who still claims that she was adopted, even though I was there when she was born. I said, no, I was there. It was mommy. And she said, no, she never loved me the way she loved you. And we're like, okay, fine. This is a frustrated artist to me.
Yeah, I love those stories. I love the idea of taking the cotidiano, the everyday, what you experience, and putting pen to paper. I remember this little book. One of my favorite books is called Historias de la Refinería. And it's by this man named Silvio Rodriguez, not the singer. And he's a Puerto Rican who worked in the refinery in Corco. And this is a horrible, horrible refinery in Peñuelas. And my mother used to say when we drove by, Mira Tita, Tita is my tribal name. Mira Tita, that looks like New York. And it's just a bunch of like chimneys with lights. And so there's a big problem in Peñuelas because they're dumping cenizas, poisonous, toxic waste in Peñuelas. Anyway, I went to the protest. I was in solidarity with them, and I met this poet, essayist, writer, and he shared with me his book. And it is the stories of the men who worked, and the women who worked in the refinería in the 1950s as it was being built. It is a gem of a book. It is a gem of a book because it takes us to the moment where Rockefeller bought the most beautiful beaches of Puerto Rico. He bought them right out, and he built all of these refineries, right? His people. And so it's everyday moments. Los Diarios de Jesús Colón, right? Another Puerto Rican in the 1920s, was it? Where he's writing about what it was like to be a Puerto Rican in New York during this time. So it may not seem like a big deal, but for me, I think about like future generations, 7 generations, like write a letter to your, future grandchildren, to your future nieces and nephews, and let them know what it was like to live in the era of Bad Bunny. That is to me literature. And I just kind of want to demystify this whole, you're published, you're not, because at the end of the day, these are stories, and these stories really, really, really matter.
Yeah. And if you are a writer, if you're someone here who has a journal and you have a diary, congratulations, you're a confessional writer.
Yes.
You're a confessional writer.
Cecilia Vicuña, Chilena, published a book when she was 27 years old, which is like the stupid diary. She kept a diary for 31 days, and then she published it like with a very funny and wonderful title. But yes, it was Chile at the time in the 1970s. She captured what was happening in Chile when Allende was killed in a diary. So diarists are beautiful.
Oh my God, I think it would be amazing to have like an event where we just take pages of our diaries and just like put them up. Angie.
Yeah.
We're gonna work on this. And just have, me and Angie talk about this all the time in terms of like, oh my God, if someone was to read this, my diary entry today, they would just be like, this is the most boring, this is Elisabet, like this is the profound poet, because it's just like, I had a bagel and it was terrible and I wished I would have got, something else. But these things, these mundane moments, like you were talking about, these everyday moments are so important. You don't have to be deep and profound. Your whole life is deep and profound because you're alive in a world that doesn't cater to our existence. So it's yeah. I have that. I'm gonna think about that event.
Anaïs Nin, Cubana, Francesa, born in Havana. She wrote a diary when she started writing diaries at 9 years old, and she's like the only writer, the only diarist who tracked her entire life until, I think she lived until her 80s, and she had a diary every day. I actually used one of her journal entries in the book, and she wrote erotica, so that's kind of sexy too, to write about your sexual escapades. Like anything is game, your recipes, your family recipes becomes literature, right? How to eat a guayaba from your lens becomes, right? Another form of way of telling the story.
Right, and I think when you journal, when you write, and I have to admit that I don't write my journal every day, but I do when I'm at my most, when I most need to talk to someone, I write to the page. I speak to the page because I can say anything. Y no pueden contestar. And no questions, But I think that's another reason why it's so good for for all of us really to not think of I'm going to be a writer, so I have to write a diary. No, write a diary to document your life.
Yep.
That's it. It's not for any other reason but so that you can go 6 years ago and find out, something about it. I recently came across actually my first sexual encounter that I wrote in a journal that I saved. I was like rolling on the floor laughing. It was so funny. At the time, it was not funny. It was actually very serious, and it was like a big deal for me. But then I came back and I wrote it, and I'm like going, "Oh my God!" It was like a cartoon. And so those kinds of things, you can't put them off. If you do it immediately, it's like you have it. You have that moment in your life that is so important and that you'll probably forget and you might not think about again. I just came across it actually accidentally, and it was like hysterical. I was just laughing so hard. And when I die, somebody will find it and think, "Oh my God," but I didn't put a flag on it or anything. It's just like, we have archivists here, and they know what it's about.
Can we talk about Puerto Rican literature and what it means to you, and this whole thing about Puerto Rican literature being written in exile? I don't like the word diaspora. I think we're all in exile because nobody left Puerto Rico happy.
That's right.
No one.
That's
I mean, raise your hands who left paradise happy, or sad, or So can we talk about that? Because I've heard you in other venues talk about what you write and why you write.
Well, I think for me, because again, my generation had a completely different education than younger generations get right now. And in Puerto Rico, when I was, even from elementary school, we had declamación. And this was where we had to memorize a poem, and then we had to stand up on Friday or Thursday, whatever the day was, and uno por uno, we had to declamar the poems that we had. And so that was my first connection to literature, was to memorize the poems of our great poets in Puerto Rico of the time. Usually they would be selected by the teachers. They would give us several options. If there were 30 kids, there would be like 10 poems, so that, we would, then of course we would compete with one another who would declamar better than everybody else. So that's when it did get competitive. But that was where I became aware that we have this rich history of poets and writers who are writing about our experience, and to me it went through the poetry. And of course, when I read it now, sometimes I'm like cringing because a lot of those poems were written about people like me, campesinos, gente de campo, written by really rich people from San Juan, who are still looking at the happy jíbaros down there.
Come mierdas.
Lo come mierda. But when as a kid, you really get the sense of yourself I mattered to somebody, and it's in writing, and I can actually recite these words and I can tell these stories, even though probably at a certain point in my life I realized this is bullshit. We're not all happy. We're not singing because we're joyful. We're here because we're trying to get a job done, and we're just trying to distract ourselves from how hard it is, but we still have to do it. So those kinds of things, I think I became a writer when I started questioning that romantic vision of people like me, Jibaras de Macún, or people living in El Fanguito, you know, and all the stuff that I was reading was not about people like me, except from a different angle. And so when I started writing, I said, I'm not going to write from that perspective, because I want to write from on the ground, what it was like to be there. And I think that was the kind of the breakthrough for me, to decide that I was going to focus on you know, especially women, because I'm surrounded by them, but also, you know, focus on Puerto Ricans of the different economic level than the literature that we all knew up till, you know, actually quite recently, because la verdad es que if you look at all the literature in Puerto Rico, was all these guys que estudiaron en Barcelona, you know, and not us. That was not us.
Yeah. And your entry, or the way you see Puerto Rican literature?
I think that, so in my experience, like I said, I grew up very insular. I grew up in the Pentecostal community. I grew up in Bushwick, Brooklyn, which was like Boricua hub in the 80s and 90s. And I also didn't have access to Boricua literature. It wasn't in the libraries that I went to in Bushwick, which was very interesting because Boricua culture was all around me. It was my people, it was my neighbors, it was the food I ate, it was the music I listened to, it was the way we argued, it was the way we loved, it was, everything was Puerto Rican. I never felt disconnected from Puerto Rican culture, aside from being born in Brooklyn, New York, right? It was a shock to me when I got older and people were like, you're not Puerto Rican, okay? You were born in Brooklyn. And now I understand the differentiation. I understand New Yorican, I understand these things, but there was never a disconnect because my culture was always there. But it wasn't anywhere where society said it mattered. So it wasn't in the schools, it wasn't in the library. And so it was confusing because I was like, y entonces, like, am I here? Am I not here? You know? And so I always say that I inherited a culture of forgetting. And so I had to sort of write to remember who I was and where I came from and what that looked like for me. I also dropped out of high school in the 10th grade. I say dropped out very generously because I had a baby. I was pregnant, and I walked into the counselor's. My mother found out that I was pregnant before I was before. That's another story. But my mom was like, "You're pregnant," and I was like, "What are you talking about? I'm a virgin. I've never even." What do you mean? Long story short, she got a pregnancy test, and I didn't flush one day, and she went to the bathroom, and she stuck. Yeah, it was Boricua moms are not a joke. She was like, and she came out, she was like, I was like, I didn't even pee on that. What are you talking about? Anyway, this is the living room for real. Yeah, we just got personal. Pero, you know, I dropped out of high school. I told my counselor that I was pregnant, and she was like, well, we cannot have you here because you're not, that's a bad example for the girls that are here. Terrible. And so at that time, there was high school for pregnant women, which that was dismantled in, I think it was 2007 in New York City. But there was a high school for pregnant women. And so I had to go to that high school. It was very underfunded. And I dropped out because there was just no resources for Puerto Rican girls like me who were 15, 16, pregnant, about to have a baby. And so my focus wasn't on Puerto Rican literature. My focus was on surviving. Yeah. My focus was on living. Yeah. But that too was Puerto Rican literature, because it was a life that I was going to write about. But I didn't know that that was a possibility for me. And so I just kept writing in my journal, and I just kept writing about these things because that was the only place that I had hope. And so I came into Puerto Rican literature later on when I discovered Willie Perdomo on New Year's
My husband, my beautiful, beloved husband.
on Def Poetry Jam, when I started, because I experienced houselessness, and it was very difficult for me to like get to the library, and like I was working like 3 jobs, I was trying to support my kid, and there was just a lot happening. And so, I sat down, I saw Def Poetry Jam, and then I saw Maya del Valle, and I saw Willie Perdomo, and then I was like, espérate, y esta gente, they out here performing things that I'm writing about. You mean there's an audience for this? You mean that people want to hear this shit? And then I Googled the New York Poets Cafe, and then I walked into the New York Poets Cafe, and then I started to do my research, but it was very late in life, and I say that very intentionally because I think that there are still so many people and so many of our community members who, I step into, colleges and spaces all the time, and I know that there are folks that still don't have access to Puerto Rican literature because I was one of those people, and so I think about it in that sense. I think about, what access do I have? How am I writing in a way that's going to reach folks who are living lives that need to be told, who are living Puerto Rican literature, and that's the way that I think about it. I don't know if that made any sense, but that's the way that I think about Puerto Rican literature as a living, breathing thing.
Yeah. And I love that it's Puerto Rican literature in English as well. Yes. That's really important, right?
Yeah.
And that's the conversation you and I have in the salas.
We had because when I Was Puerto Rican was published in 1992 or 1993, it came out in English because my editor did not speak Spanish. I had to write it in English. So I went to Puerto Rico. And man, those people really did not like the fact that I was writing.
The elites.
The elite. They did not like the fact that I was writing about the poor, rural campesinos de Puerto Rico in English, as if, the people who read that work have not seen any of us, which brings even more invisibility to people like us. I mean, I still feel, even though I now live in Westchester, I still live in El Campo. I'm still a woman del Campo, right? But I think it was really shocking to me just how unfriendly that was, because I was, I was writing in English. Then the book comes out in Spanish, and things changed a little bit, but still, there was, a lot of my friends in Puerto Rico protected me from. I heard about this really, actually, quite recently, that there was un escándalo. I don't know, pero fue un escándalo because of writing in English about the kinds of things I was writing about, which never occurred to me that would be a problem. That is, if I had written in Spanish, it would not have been published by this publisher because there was nobody to send it to. They did not have, and right, even now there's very few publishers that actually will take a book in Spanish if there isn't the English version, if they're going to be selling it in the United States. And this is a whole other thing that
my God.
This is a whole other discussion for another time. But those are, that was a real surprise to me, that here I worked really hard. I mean, yo abrí las venas on the page about my life.
But not in Spanish.
It wasn't in Spanish. It was a problem for a lot of people. Pero those are the people who eventually came around, thank God. But I think it's so important, again, for those of you who are aspiring writers at any stage in your process, is that you can't pay attention to that stuff. You just can't, because it really stops you. And if I had known that, I might not have continued writing, because I only had one publisher and she did not speak Spanish. So again, we go back to this sense of of the support of our cohorts, of our friends, of people who know what we're trying to do, and who encourage us in all our crazy things that we might come up with, and make it possible for us to not have the imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
or you have it, but then to put it aside, because we all go through that, obviously. But to have that sense that I have to do this, and nobody else can do it but me in this way, because you're the individual person. Here were 3 writers, right, writing a lot of stories about Puerto Rican life, and we have not run out of ideas or stories, and then we have a room full of stories here.
And also they're very different. 3 Puerto Rican writers writing about very different things, but you were saying earlier, but we are in tradition. We're part of a tradition, writing about a lot of different things.
No, but I think we created this tradition of it's okay to be a Puerto Rican who writes in English.
Yes.
I think we did that.
Yes. Yes, we did.
We'll take credit for that.
There's a generation of us who are Puerto Rican but weren't exposed to the language. So we appreciate that you wrote in English. Otherwise, we would have never, I'm in my 60s. I would have never read your books if they had been in Spanish, because my grandmother came here, and my mother was first generation. So I'm second generation, and because they wanted us to be as American as possible, none of us were exposed to the language. So imagine there'd be a whole group of people like me who wouldn't enjoy your literature, so I do appreciate it.
Yes.
I do understand it.
I think, do you have any questions? Because we just gotta, please, yeah, she's got the mic.
I'm going to take a couple at a time, so
Yeah.
maybe we can start here and then we'll pass them down.
Thank you all for coming. Really appreciate it, and your stories and everything that you're saying is really incredible and impactful. It's kind of related to your experience about the community in Puerto Rico, like not really liking that your book was in English. It kind of reminds me of this idea of like, los secretos se quedan en la casa, when you're in your family, like we keep secrets at home, like we don't tell people what's going on at home. So my question is, for the 3 of you, how did you imagine like a new world, a new life, this way of like seeing things differently as our parents? Like for us, for me, the American dream has meant like be an attorney, be a doctor, like all of the very traditional paths. So how did you like move away from that if that was your experience? And what do you advise to us who may be thinking of shifting gears and like moving the artist route?
It was very easy for me because I experienced being thrown away by most of society. And so I had no other choice but to stand up and forge a way forward, because everything that I saw, everything in the media told me that my life was worth nothing. And so if I was going to stay alive, I had to believe the opposite, just to be able to make it to work in the morning. I had to believe that there was a hope. And so I think that I write with that in mind. What is the hope in the midst of this despair? What is going to keep me going forward? Because I very quickly found out that if I did not create this path for myself, I would be lost. I would not, I refused. And so I think there is, for me, it was a refusal to believe that because I was a teen mom, because I was Puerto Rican, because I grew up in Bushwick, because I, was below the poverty line, because I was a high school, all of these things that society says, I only saw those things when it was time, I only saw that type of person that I was in the media when that type of person graduated college. right? And it was just like, oh, this person was a teen mom and they had a baby and they grew up in the slums and now they are, you know, graduating from Geseke University, right? And it's just like, oh, now your life matters because it is, you've achieved some sort of external success, right? And I just, I didn't have that. I was 21, going to a GED program in the basement of a church. I had to create this life for myself. I had to believe that I was worth more because if I didn't, I would die. And I refused to die. So for me, it was very easy to say, you know, what are we making up today? And a lot of that making up, a lot of that imagining was in my writing, was in my stories. Like Esmeralda said, it was just for me at the time. I didn't know where it was gonna go, but I needed to imagine a better place for me. And sometimes that better place was literally just in my work, in the things that I was writing about my life.
Wow.
Progress, right? Progress. I think in many ways we've been fooled to understand what progress is. When we think about the land, I'm on this like get back to your motherland as soon as you can. Puerto Rico is being sold piece by piece, and pretty soon there's not going to be any Puerto Ricans in Puerto Rico. So, and some of the most beautiful, like I keep repeating this, right? Experiences I've had with artistry has been with the people who tend to the land. And so, my advice to you, I think it's great to be a lawyer, and we need lawyers. We need Puerto Rican lawyers. We need women lawyers. But we also need Puerto Rican artistry in the world. So go for it. There is no, ¿cómo se llama? Like when you jump and there's like a support system. There's no safety net. There's no safety net when you're an artist, but you know, you just learn how to fly. Go for it.
I think there's another question.
I'm going to ask some questions from the Zoom, and then I'll take one more question from this side. So from Zoom, I have two questions. How do you think we can change accessibility to Puerto Rican authors and literature in the United States? And also, what are your thoughts about the sentiment of not Puerto Rican enough or not Latino enough within our own community? And how might that affect the stories we are told or are allowed to tell, and vice versa when we're considered not American enough? Then I'm going to take one more question.
Yeah. Okay. Hola.
Hola.
Said I.
Hello.
Yeah.
I want to say wow to you three ladies. I've never been close to Sandra or Elisabet, but I followed you from the very beginning. You're one of my heroes. And as a Latina, you know, because we didn't have anything else. My experience for Puerto Rican literature were two things: Perry Thomas, Beat Down These Mean Streets, and my mother reading Julia de Burgos' poems to us, because she would say, I don't care, you're going to learn, I don't care. But, you know, I thank you for exposing that, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I also feel that you're right, we have so many stories, and sometimes I'm like one of those like delayed writers. I feel like I want to write, but I just don't know how to go. And I know what I have to do, I just don't, I need that push, or I need that, soy vaga, I don't like to type. So,
Buy a notebook and get an expensive pen. Because if you have a cheap pen, that you feel like if you have a pen and it's one that's like a little bit more expensive than you would buy at Staples, then you feel forced to use it. This is how I justify my. So that's one way. You know, it's just really it's a gift to you. So the first gift is the really good notebook and a good pen, and then just write and don't edit it. Don't say anything. Don't edit yourself, and don't keep yourself from saying whatever you want to say, because nobody else is going to see it until you're ready to show it to them.
To the world.
So, and to show it to the world. I also thank you for your question, but I wanted to respond to the Zoom question about this whole issue about who is, Puerto Riqueño de pura cepa and all that stuff, First of all, don't do that to other people. I mean, really, it's so ridiculous. It shows your ignorance more than whatever it is. And it does not in any way improve the situation for people who were born outside of the islands, or who don't speak Spanish, or their parents took them to another place, they don't, Puerto Ricans don't just come to the United States, by the way. We go to all over the place. So you're as Puerto Rican as you think you are, not as other people think you are. So just don't fall for that. And if somebody challenges you at that, you say, well, how Puerto Rican are you? And let them define what does 100%ness means, because they cannot do it. It's a way to put you down, and just don't allow it. And I think it will help you, it'll help everybody who goes through this, and I think it makes you feel better to know that you are as 100% as you are, whatever that is, and just own it.
I love it, and I just want to add that Spanish is a settler language. That's all. Because really, like if the pura cepa is the indigenous people of Borican.
Okay, mic drop. That's it, ya. Se acabó.
We have more questions?
And then we can, if you can pass the mic on, we'll take two at a time.
No worries.
Thank you. It had never dawned on me, because I always wondered if you first write in English or Spanish, and it's a recurring theme amongst the three of you. And you also talked about the publishers wanting you to be a product. So I'm kind of trying to mix two questions into one about how the three of you, do you start in English or Spanish for your own purposes, right? And it had never dawned on me, your story of like, yeah, I had to write this in English first because I wouldn't have gone published. Yeah. And so what's your preference, if there's one or the other, or what's the process for the three of you about that?
Well, I write in whatever language it comes in, including languages I don't speak. So I have, I do a lot of handwriting, and there's a lot of symbols and weird little drawings and sketches and stuff like that.
You have 4 languages in your last book, which is very
yes, I'm telling you, when I was writing Las Madres, really, I did not set out to write a character who speaks 4 languages, 2 of which I do not speak. That's how they came to me. I said, what are you doing in my book? And they said, well, you invited me in, and this is me. And so I had to kind of accept that. But I actually write, I write in both, I really write this mezcla, for a first draft. I'm one of these people, I think we're both filmmakers. There's a process when you're a filmmaker that you capture as much as you can, because you don't know where the gold is when you're flying by the seat of your pants, right? So you capture everything, and then the fun begins when you start editing, and that's when it really becomes something. So I don't worry about my first drafts or my first writings, because I know I'm going to make it better eventually. But right now I have to get it down the way it is, and if a Russian word comes, I'll just put 4 or 5 little X's or Russian word in it or whatever, to maintain the rhythm of what I'm doing as I'm creating. The creative process is very mysterious. It's also very fragile, and you can't go far. You can't tell the creative process what to do. It guides you. And so if you're the kind of writer who doesn't want to type, write by hand. If you're more comfortable with your laptop, go to your laptop, but make sure that you understand what your process is. And mine, whenever I get a new editor, I say, I will give you the messiest, the first draft that you'll ever see, because I do not worry about that stuff.
Is it sometimes in both languages as you write?
I do. I write in language. I write in numbers sometimes. I'll put numbers in there. You know, I mean, it's just, it doesn't matter. You know, doodles, and it doesn't matter how you get it down. Just get it down. That's the important thing. I even also do. I record things. I have my app that I write in. I'm able to put media into it. So sometimes I need to. A dialogue is coming too fast and I can't write it fast. So I'll record it, and I'll put it in my project file so that I can use it. So just use whatever makes it possible for you to write it. And don't worry about it should be this way or it should be that way. There are no shoulds. My mother used to say, don't should on you.
Wonderful.
I write in English, but I'm also writing in Spanish. And I have found that it takes me to different portals when I write in Puerto Rican Spanish. It's really pretty amazing. And I'm exploring the Spanish language, Puerto Rican Spanish, which is the most beautiful Spanish in the world.
That when We Make It was being translated into Spanish, I wanted to make sure that it was very New Yorican Spanish. And so I think and speak in Spanglish, and I write in English. But there was a poem in When We Make It where both in English and in the Spanish version I have the word supermercado, and I have super with an L, obviously, and it was very obvious to me. There was no typo there. I was like, what? So they sent it back, and I'm confused because they're like, well, it's super, no, the R, and I was like, what? And I had to go to my mom because I was super confused. Estaba super confused. And but yeah,
Please tell me you kept the L.
We kept the L. It's there. There's something in publishing called STET.
Yes.
And it's my favorite thing. So STET is basically when your editor comes back with edits. And I don't know what STET is the acronym for, but whatever. It means leave my shit alone. That's what it means. And I used it a lot for the for the translation, and it was amazing.
I had the same experience when I translated when I was Puerto Rican myself, and so they sent it. I said to the editor, who did not speak Spanish, by the way, I said, please send it to other Spanish speakers to make sure that, because I said this is not Spanish, this is Puerto Rican Spanish, and so I ended up writing a little prologue explaining, because I knew that some people were going to read it who were not in Puerto Rico.
Probably Argentinian.
Yo no sé de dónde son y de dónde vienen, pero so I just did that to make sure that I knew the difference. I can speak Spanish, but I speak Puerto Rican Spanish. That's what I choose to do. And so things like that, yes, we constantly I'm also a STET queen. In red, I do it in red. Red, make a little circles and all that stuff, because there is that sense that we have to fit into a certain mold that we do not fit into. We just do not. We refuse to. We shouldn't. And why? Why do that? Just be yourself.
So we want to thank you for this really amazing presentation.